Origin Story, Chapter 4, Old Flames. Ramsey listened to the message left on his answering machine. He played it over and over as he hadn't heard Rosa's voice for such a long time. Age had changed it ever so slightly, but it was definitely the Rosa he had once adored. His feelings for her flooded his emotions. It took his breath away. Time hadn't diminished Ramsey's feelings for Rosa, and it had taken a long time for his boyhood heart to heal. The man Ramsey was now, however, left a lot to be desired. How could he let Rosa see the man he had become? He wanted to drop everything and run to her rescue, to be the hero of the hour. He shook his head and laughed. Reality check, Larson. He looked around. He really looked around at his surroundings. Ramsey's standards had fallen short. He hadn't intended to live this way, but it had sort of crept up while his mind wandered elsewhere. He allowed himself to view his lifestyle and apartment from another's perspective. The walls had increasingly been used for problem solving, and there were books on top of books on top of books. The collection outgrew all library shelves. Often our mindset and reality intertwine in this way. Chaos in your surroundings reflect chaos in your mind, and a lack of ambition doesn't end with your work life. There was a safe that had once belonged to his father, originally from England during the Victorian era. It had a huge lock made from iron, and it bore an old plaque. The corners had rusted, but the sentimental value remained. The safe was the only tangible reminder from his childhood. Pizza boxes were strewn around the place, and his sofa had throws and pillows, which were signs of it being used as an occasional bed during problem-solving late into the night. There were photographs mixed with certificates and plaques, a testament to the life he had led. He was accomplished in lots of areas, with an extraordinarily high IQ. Photos had been taken with friends and eminent physicists. Letters were scattered around, often unopened. Even to the untrained eye, putting all this together, you got a disorganized mess. You'd imagine a man capable of so much would keep his apartment and his own self-care on point. However, he needed to improve in both areas. Rosa's call had brought this stark reality home to him. How could he meet her in this state? Then his emotions came to the fore, answering that question for him. How could he not? Beneath this rather unkempt exterior, there was a mind rich in capabilities. He was in that top 1%. His childhood was marred by his total genius, coupled with another gift bestowed on him, an acute sense of hearing. However, Ramsey Larson's childhood was unusually quiet. His father, a theoretical physicist, was never there, and when he was, he ruffled the young boy's hair and called that parenting. Mom did everything in the house, but always had a drink on the go. She rarely spoke to Ramsey. As such, he kept his own counsel and inhabited his own little world. His world contained books on espionage and secret agents. He realized at an early age he could break codes very quickly, and it wasn't long before he found books from his father's library related to ciphers and cryptography. Ramsey had excellent hearing and would use it to sneak into his father's study secretly to open the safe. He would listen to the safe tumblers click, and then with a celebratory chuckle, he would open it. His father, a paranoid soul, changed the combination weekly as he saw this as good practice. Ramsey never failed to open the safe, but he nearly got caught a few times. As such, he was hyper-vigilant during the safe-cracking duty. Ramsey's hypervigilance was used against his father's terrifying dog, too. He spent much of his childhood tiptoeing around so the dog could not hear him. He got so good at it that he could sneak up on the dog and then walk away without the dog even knowing he was there. He honed this skill through various failures, leading to nasty attacks from the animal, but he eventually mastered the craft. After all, as a boy, he was a silent, safe-cracking, code-breaking secret agent, and who wouldn't want to be one of those? As a man, Ramsey had taken his boyhood dreams into a cold but solid reality. He was still hyper-vigilant, incredibly light on his feet, and equipped with excellent hearing. He was no longer a child secret agent, but now a private detective. And he was good. He still continued to code break, safe crack, and solve puzzles, spending years working on some of history's most difficult unsolved mysteries. As a private eye, Ramsey loved cold cases and unsolvable mysteries. He was a sucker for a case nobody else wanted, and this call from Rosa, however painful it would be to revisit the past, he simply could not refuse. He awoke from his slumber and stood in the mirror for a moment, slowly but surely re-equipping his detective gear, complete with a long coat and hat. Come on, Larson, pull yourself together, man. Ramsey drove to meet Rosa at the Ivy. He looked forward to seeing her again, and although she sounded agitated on the phone, it did not deter him. He stopped near the entrance of her house and picked up his journal from the passenger seat. Ramsey's journal contained detailed information on ciphers, codes, previous cases solved, and many other cheat pages on safe cracking and codex mirror writing. He used this journal as a starting point for the most technically complex cases. In essence, he was armed and very effective. The cold night air greeted him as he stepped out of his vehicle. The moon was fully visible. Without the cover of clouds, it was eerily silent. Ramsey walked up to the front door of the Ivy and was about to ring the bell when he realized the door was ajar. He pushed it gently and opened it quite silently. Entering the house, he felt concerned and made his way to Rosa's favorite room. Why was the door open? Was there something wrong? He moved silently towards the room and saw Rosa standing over the table, reading something. He whispered audibly, "Psst, Rosa."
"Ramsey, is that really you?"
Rosa answered with shock. His piercing blue eyes brought her back to when she was a young woman, before all of this complexity.
"Your ability to move silently has not lessened over the years, my friend. You could give Mao, my cat, a run for his money,"
Rosa teased. "Sorry, I hadn't meant to startle you. Your door was open, and I just wanted to check you were okay," Ramsey replied. They both shared a smile. Rosa averted her eyes and broke away from the moment. In truth, the door being open was the least of her worries, but it was sweet of Ramsey to feel protective of her, even after all these years had passed. "What is it, Rosa?" Ramsey inquired. "Why did you call me?" Rosa looked at him and wanted to say she was sorry for the hurt she had caused him, and that she wished now things had been different. She wanted to tell him desperately she'd wish they had stayed together. Rosa felt fulfilled by seeing other people's happiness, not necessarily her own. Poor Ramsey had been a consequence of this, for now, the one person she could count on for sound advice was beside her in the Ivy, and she had every faith that together they would unravel this nightmare. She stood aside, showing the many papers laid before her. Ramsey took his journal and put it next to the documents that fanned across the tabletop. He stared for what seemed an eternity and scanned all the papers in front of him. He appeared to hold his breath while Rosa looked on in silence. Finally, Ramsey let out a large sigh.
"Is that a good sigh or a bad sigh?"
Rosa inquired. "It's just a sigh, Rosa." Ramsey laughed as he spoke. "These papers contain accounts, hidden codes, scientific analysis, and I'm willing to wager a handful of secrets. This looks like a great case in the making. Thank you for bringing me in on this." Rosa replied,
"I had no choice. I couldn't make sense of lots of it, but you're welcome, and I'm glad you're here."
In truth, Ramsey had looked at the papers and was rightly alarmed to see a name attached to the accounts. Mr. Pryor, a name he had come across before in a previous case involving financing some illegal projects. Mr. Pryor's reputation gave an air of seriousness to the situation for Ramsey, and the pair began settling into a full night of work. Ramsey hadn't taken this type of motivational spirit for a long time, and he was well received by Rosa, who hadn't slept for a few nights. Her senses told her that Mr. Thraki's evil nature was growing stronger, and his thirst for revenge would ultimately cause mass catastrophe. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Mr. Thraki retrieved the mannequin from T and Sully's van and returned to the monastery. He placed the dummy beside the stained-glass windows which had greeted him upon entry every day throughout his early life. He searched into the faceless face once more while touching the fabric of its suit tentatively. He considered his own clothes and stared downwards with his eyes resting upon the bloodstains. He slowly undressed the mannequin, removing each article of clothing and leaving the dummy completely naked. After disrobing, he, in turn, dressed in the brown checkered suit. The suit had been designed for a much broader man, and so it hung limply on Mr. Thraki. The years spent at the orphanage had taken their toll on his growth. In part, the sleeves covered his hands, looking very much like a boy in a man's attire. He rolled up the trousers, creating the best fit. His mood lifted, and he whispered to himself, "And now for the piece de resistance." Reaching down, he removed the bowler hat and placed it upon his own head. Next, he fastened the laces upon the sneakers he had taken from Sully, and in his troubled mind, the look was complete. He felt great. Mr. Dothraki remembered another time being dressed in a top hat and tails occasionally as an orphan, but couldn't remember why. Instinctively, he reached out for the dummy's hand, then held it up, placing his hand upon its waist and creating a strange sort of dance hold. He looked down at his feet and then straightened his spine, and he began to dance with the mannequin slowly while, in his head, a symphony was playing. He swirled around, dancing awkwardly with the dummy, focusing on his arm extensions and neck tilt. As the dance gathered pace, the odd couple attempted to glide across an imaginary dance floor, and Mr. Thraki was transported to a flashback. An intrusive memory had punctured his thoughts with frightening clarity, trapping him in a strange reenactment. Mr. Thraki's memory of his dance steps was impeccable. He was in his flow while the naked mannequin was a mere passenger dragged along for the ride. While dancing, he caught sight of the dummy's reflection in the window. It looked as though it was dancing alone. Intrigued, he moved closer to the window with his partner for a better view of the reflection, so he momentarily threw the dummy down and recoiled in disbelief. Then, mesmerized, he reached out to touch the glass. "There is no reflection," he mouthed the words slowly. His mind toyed with the new strange reality. He hoisted the mannequin beside him and shook it violently in front of the window. The dummy looked like a puppet, but moved independently like some freak show. "I'm invisible. I've made myself disappear," he muttered. His mind searched for all the possibilities, eventually settling on just one. "No wonder the suit was so damn important to you, Strostik. You created an invisibility suit." Mr. Dothraki began to laugh maniacally. He stormed from window to window, searching for himself and testing the hypothesis that he was actually invisible. All thoughts of his cruel childhood were put to one side yet again. For now, self-preservation was uppermost. Mr. Dothraki realized there was a job still to do. He recognized there were severe issues to deal with at the orphanage, and even he realized it was time to sort them out. Firstly, he considered the mess in the lab. Yawn, whatever. Now the two bodies in the dormitory were a considerable problem. Also, the van they arrived in was another problem. Then he glanced down at Sully's sneakers on his feet. "You two will have to go, I'm afraid," he said, speaking to the shoes. "Time to call my guy, Percy." Percy, an employee of Mr. Dothraki, had become accustomed to his scrapes and misdemeanors. Numerous times, Percy had been called to tidy up after Mr. Dothraki. He was paid handsomely for this niche work, and his skill set had never let him down. He was that one guy that would save Mr. Dothraki from being locked up, and he was proud to have kept him away from the justice system for many years now. Percy was in a unique position, and because of what he knew, he was also very vulnerable. He did not doubt that if Mr. Dothraki wanted to, he would kill him too. That's why he kept a revolver in his inside pocket whenever he attended one of these cleanup jobs. It gave him some comfort from the unhinged nature of his employer. The phone call didn't come as a complete surprise. And anyway, Percy was planning on a rather expensive holiday for himself and his current girlfriend, who was more than capable of spending his money. Mr. Dothraki lifted the phone and paused for a moment with feelings of excitement. He was wearing an invisibility suit, after all. which meant the phone looked like it was hanging in midair. He proceeded to make a collect call. The call was accepted, and a voice could be heard at the end of the phone. "Hello, who is this?" Percy answered. "It's 2 a.m., Percy. You know who this is. I have a job for you." Mr. Thraki replied, "I need a cleanup job done right now." Percy sighed and cleared his throat. "Sure, boss, no problem. Just give me the details and I'll get it done." "I need your full attention to the detail here. Big things are happening, and you may not see me for a while." Mr. Thraki laughed. Percy thought Mr. Thraki sounded elated and pumped, which was not his usual mood when asking for this type of job to be done. Nevertheless, Mr. Thraki gave him the address and explained the details. "You'll find a van outside the monastery with keys in it, and the packages are upstairs in the dormitory. Use the van and take the packages to a place you won't be seen. Torch the van and the packages using the usual method. Then when you collect your car, make sure you are not followed. Oh, and Percy, by the way, there is a pair of sneakers in the entrance hall beneath the stained glass windows. Get rid of them. They're not quite my style," Mr. Thraki instructed. Percy sighed again and put the phone down. Mr. Thraki walked outside and removed the bowler hat, which allowed him to reappear in the car's window reflection. He could now become visible and invisible at his pleasure, and the ideas flooded his mind of how he would use this ability against his enemy and the suit's creator, Dr. Strostig. He entered the vehicle and took one last look at the orphanage in his rearview mirror before slowly driving away.